Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well and welcome. This, as Ellen had told you, is for individuals who are here on an F or J1 visa, 5 years or less. Scholars, 2 years or less. Everything that I deal with in here is pertaining to that area. All right, if you're outside those parameters, there will be different answers to questions, okay? Now, please note that if you have e-file, that's wrong, okay? Because the form that you would have to do, you cannot e-file. So if any of you have, you need to talk with us afterwards, okay? Internal Revenue Service. You may have heard of them, you may not have, but that is the taxing agency for the United States of America. We're the ones, Internal Revenue, well, it used to be me, but I'm not there anymore, but they're the agency that collects all the income tax returns and the taxes. Not only income tax, but other types of taxes. Now, the state, there's like more states. Each state is their own little kingdom. So they have their own rules and regulations as far as taxes is concerned. There's some states that have no taxes. There's some states that have a lot of taxes. All right, if you were in those states, you need to go back to that state and see whether or not you need to file. If you were in more than one state, you may have to file 2 state returns. Only one federal, because we cover all of them. Now, let's talk about some basic vocabulary. Alien, you will hear this, is generally any person who is not a U.S. citizen, but you are a citizen of planet Earth. Student, person that is temporarily in the U.S. under an F, J, sometimes a Q or M visa. Haven't seen that yet, but mostly the J or the F. Teacher or trainee, this is a person who is not a student, but who is temporarily here, normally under a J, sometimes under a Q visa. You will need to understand the word compensation, earnings. That is what we call wages, salary. I go somewhere, I do something for them, and they pay me money. So they pay me for the job that I do. That's wages, that's compensation. But when I talk about income, that will include not only those wages, but it may also include interest income. It may include dividends, scholarships or fellowships that are taxable. It's going to encompass all of those. So you need to know the difference between that when we talk about it. You may hear me slip up and say IRS. I just need you to know that I really mean Internal Revenue Service. Income tax return, we're going to really get into that. All right, but that is a statement that is filed to the Internal Revenue Service or IRS. So I think you're here because you want to know whether or not you need to file a return with the Internal Revenue Service. Well, let me tell you this. All individuals temporarily in the U.S. on an F1, J1 visa must file a form with Internal Revenue. Now, remember those parameters I gave you at the beginning, okay? So which form must they file? Ladies and gentlemen, you must file Form 8843. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, statement for exempt individuals and individuals with a medical condition.
Basically for that.
If you are here under those parameters, this is a form you must file. Let's take a look at that. And it's really an easy form.
I see your process.
It's just asking you for information, okay? We're going to start off with your name. And of course, we're still using Joy Kim. I am so fond of her. She has been a student at UV over 12 years now. We're going to put her first name. Your first name would go there. Last name, and your tax ID number. Most of you may have a social security number, or you may have an ITIN number, an individual tax identifying number. The next thing we want is the address in country of residence. That should not be a U.S. address. That should be your home address. For Ms. Kim, she lives in Shanghai, China. Where do you live? That's what you're going to put there. Now we want to know, okay, we know where you come from, but where are you in the United States? I want to know that address. So I want you to put that address in this box here. So she lives in College Town, New York. She's been living there for the last 12 years, too. All right, so we got that. But you're going to put your information. Let's start with part 1, which is just general information. 1A just says, okay, well, what visa are you here under? What visa did you come here under? Was it an F visa? A J visa? And I want to know the date you entered the United States. Ms. Kim entered in 2012, 12 years. 1B, what is her current? Did she change? Did she go from an F to a J to an F? We want to know that if that happened to you on line B. What's your current status? On line 2, what country were you a citizen? What is your citizenship? That's what we want on that line. Ms. Kim's happens to be the People's Republic of China. Well, okay, now line 3A says, all right, well, we know you can be a citizen, but who issued your passport? Who issued your passport? That's what you're going to put on that line. Ms. Kim had hers issued by the People's Republic of China. You're going to put who issued yours on that line. On line 3B, enter your passport number. It's in there, you open it up, there's a number. On the U.S. ones, for example, I think it's in red. No, I think they changed that. But you're going to put that number there. Now, when we get to 4A, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually asking you to count the number of days that you were in the United States. When did you come here? All right, count all those days you were here. Ms. Kim was here for the entire year of 2014, so she put 365. But she was also here in 2013 and 2012. Were you here in those years? We need you to go back and count those days that you were here in the United States. All right, the next part 2 is for teachers or trainees. But I usually just go past that because it's the same exact information that they ask for the students, and I get mostly students. So let's go on to the student part with part 3. On line 9, we want you to enter the name, address, and a telephone number of the academic institution you are attending, 2014. You may be putting down University of Buffalo, University of New York at Buffalo, I should say. Line 10, enter the name, address, and telephone number of the director of the academic or the specialized program you participated in. We want that information. For Ms. Kim, she was in the international office, and there was B. Patient was the director of the international service. Now y'all got that, B. Patient. Okay. 11, enter the U.S. visa that you held during any of these years. Well, for Ms. Kim, she was here in 2012, F. 2013 as an F visa holder also. What were your visas in those years? Were you here? If so, what visas did you hold? Line 12, were you present in the United States as a teacher, trainee, or student for any part of more than 5 calendar years? If you were, this workshop is not for you. Otherwise, you should be marking no. All right? Now we get down to line 13. During 2014, did you apply did you take steps to become a U.S. citizen, a U.S. resident? That's all they want to know. And you said, no, I didn't do that. So you just mark no. If you did, we want to know what steps you've taken. Okay? Now, the question here is to sign or not to sign. That is the question. If this is the only form you have to send in to Internal Revenue Service, you will then sign and date this form. But there's another form that we're going to go over, and if you need to complete that form also, you will just attach this form to that, and you do not need to sign this form. So again, if this is the only form that you have to file with Internal Revenue, you will sign and date it. So let's make sure that we understand this. What about, you may ask me, what about an F1 or J1 student or J1 scholar who did not earn any income in the United States at all, Barbara? What do I need to file? And my answer to you is, well, you might not have to pay taxes. But guess what? You're going to send a form to Internal Revenue Service. And what form is that, you may ask? You're going to file the Form 843, statement for exempt individuals and individuals with a medical condition. Well, you may say, well, okay, Barbara, that's not my situation. My situation is this. What about an F1 or J1 student who received only a scholarship or fellowship grant in 2014? Now, what do I have to file in that instance? First, we have to understand the taxability of scholarship or fellowship in the United States. Now, this is how it goes. If I receive scholarship or fellowship, and it is for tuition, fees, books, supplies, and equipment required, not because it might be nice, required for courses, and if I am pursuing a degree, so all of that has to come into play, then it's not taxable. Any portion of scholarship or fellowship received for room and board or exchange for teaching or research is included in your taxable income, unless it's exempt by a treaty. And we're going to go over that, okay? So, what is scholarship or fellowship, you may ask? You call it tuition waiver. Guess what? Internal Revenue calls that non-taxable scholarship. No work required. What is scholarship or fellowship? Well, you may call it room or board waiver. Guess what? Internal Revenue calls that taxable scholarship. Well, what is scholarship or fellowship? Well, you may call it teaching or research assistantship stipend. You perform work and you get paid. Guess what? Internal Revenue says, oh, that is just taxable wages. So, what do I file if I have a scholarship, but I don't have to pay taxes on it? This is just for my tuition. What do I need to do? Well, you're going to just file that Form 8843, and you're done. And you're going to sign it. Well, what if I have a scholarship or fellowship or scholarship that I have to pay tax on? Well, then you're going to file Form 8843, and you're also going to file Form 1040. And hopefully you'll be able to do a 1040 in our EC. Much easier form. Well, you may say, okay, well, what do I file if I have a scholarship I must pay tax on? And can also claim a tax treaty benefit on that scholarship. Well, what do you say then? You're going to file the Form 8843, and in order to claim any tax treaty benefit, you can only do it by filing the Form 1040 NR or the NREC. You may say, well, what do I file if I have an assistantship statement? Well, you're still going to file that Form 8843, but maybe you're going to need to file Form 1040 NR or NREZ. So, what about if I have an F1 or J1 student or a J1 scholar who earned income? It doesn't work in 2014. What then? Well, I'm still going to file that Form AA43, but maybe I might have to file that Form 1040 NR or the NREZ. But have you seen the constant? It's constantly the 8843. Filing that 8843. Okay? So we got that down. We know how to do that 8843. We know when we must file that 8843. Now we need to start seeing whether or not you need to file the other form. But first we need to understand some more vocabulary. W-2, that is a statement that you receive from employers in the United States that show how much you earn for the entire year from them, and any withholding. Some of you may have gotten that. Some of you may have gotten a 1042-S. That is a statement that you may receive for foreign persons, U.S. source income subject to withholding form. And normally you use that reported because you have a tax treaty. Helps you out with that, to categorize the income. 1040-NR, that is the full form for a U.S. non-resident alien income tax return. All the kind of incomes are on there. 1040-NREZ, a more simpler form, and hopefully this is the form you'll be able to use, is still a U.S. income tax return for certain non-resident aliens who have no dependents. Withholding. What is withholding? Well, withholding is where you go for a job, you work, they say they're going to give you $500 a week, but when you get your check, you only got $450 because they withheld taxes from that money. U.S. source income, basically all income, gain or loss from U.S. sources. So let's talk about forms W-2 and W-2S's. Well, you can have one W-2, or you can have two W-2s, or you can have a W-2 and a 1042-S. You can have two 1042-S's. You can have 5 W-2s. No 1042-S's. What am I trying to get across to you? You cannot go by your friend because they got 5 W-2s and you only got 1, because it's by the individual themselves. How many places did you work? What kind of income did you receive? All right, so you may have more than 1. Or you may only have 1. But that's an individual thing. The form was prepared by your employer. Normally it's mailed to you. Sometimes you can get it online. You do not write anything on these forms at all. Why? Because you are going to use this form as a reference to do your income tax return. And then when you're finished, you're going to attach a copy of it to the income tax return when you send it. So let's take a look at a sample W-2. They come in all shapes and sizes. But I can tell you this one thing. Box 1 will always say wages, tips, and other compensation. Box 2, very important box, because that tells you if there was any federal income tax withheld. That was money they withheld from you. You want to make sure your Social Security number is correct on there. And also, it'll tell you what state the wages were earned in, and if there was any state income tax withheld, which is a very important information that you might want to really know. Okay, let's look at a 1042-S. I love the 1042S because it will tell you exactly what kind of income you receive. And when we go and look at the tax treaty, you'll see the connection. Right up in here in box 1, it says income code. I say income code 19. That automatically is going to tell me that that was for training, some kind of employment. All right? It will give you the information. A lot of times in box 13C, it'll give you the country code so you know what treaty you're going to be filing. Okay? And then your basic information. You always make sure that everything is correct on here. All right, so we talked about on some of those when I said, well, you might have to file. Maybe you need to do a 1040 NREC. So let's find out when it has to happen and when it doesn't have to happen. You do not need to file the Form 1040 NR or the NREZ if you have only, they say you say it 3 times, it sticks. Only wages less than $3,950. Less than $950, and you don't need to claim a refund for overpaid taxes. Then guess what? If you're underneath that, you do not have to file. Well, how do I file a non-resident income tax return? Well, let's go over some more vocabulary. Standard deduction. Itemized deduction. These are all things that can be subtracted from the income. You can only take one or the other. So what is the difference between the two? Standard deduction is a standard amount that is given. So if you're single, for example, they say, we will allow you to subtract $6,100 if you're single. If you are married, we'll allow you to subtract $12,200, for example, okay, based on your filing status. It's a standard amount across the board. All right, whether you're a citizen, resident, or non-resident. Itemized deductions. These are allowable deductions, normally smaller, that I can add up together. Now, normally on a U.S. return, you weigh it, whether or not one is more than the other. So, some examples of itemized deductions are charitable contributions, state and local income tax withheld, state tax paid. But you can't have both of them. You can only have one or the other. All right, this is where I dropped the ball on you. Because unless you are an Indian student, you are only eligible for itemized deduction. Indian student, not scholar, student from India. Everyone else has to use the itemized deductions. If you are a student from India, you are allowed only because of the treaty. Only because of the treaty, you are allowed to take the standard deduction and the exemption that I'm going to talk about next. If you are not a student from India, so that means if you're a scholar from India, this does not apply to you and everyone else. Only students from India. Okay, let's talk about personal exemption. This is something all of you might be able to take. It is deducted from your income tax return. I apologize. It is an amount deducted from your income tax return for you or your dependents. Now, as long as you cannot be claimed on your parents' U.S. return, guess what? You get to deduct $3,950. Doesn't that make you happy? You can actually subtract that amount, regardless of whether or not you're a student from India, okay? All of you, as long as you can't be claimed on a U.S. income tax return as a dependent. Yay! Okay. Well, you may say, okay, Barbara, that's fine, but wait, I'm married. How about my spouse? Can I take that exemption amount for my spouse? And my answer to you is this. Only married individuals from Canada, Mexico, or South Korea. And guess what? Married individuals who are students from India. You guys worked that treaty out really good. Okay. Well, you might say, all right, okay, well, how about the children? I have children. Can I take the children, please? Again, only individuals from Canada, Mexico, or South Korea can claim children who live with them as dependents. If they're from Canada or Mexico, they can claim children that don't live with them as dependents. And students from India may be able to claim exemption for a child that is born in the U.S. It has to qualify under the qualifying child rules. Okay? All right, so you may say at this point, okay, you've just been talking about income I got to pay tax on. I can't take the standard deduction. I got to use the itemized deduction. Oh, yeah, I get that little bit of an exemption. But is there any income exempt from taxes? And I say to you, yes, there is. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not have to claim any income you receive from interest. Yes, as long as you don't have a trade business, that interest, that 1% interest that you make on your bank account, keep it. All right. So you heard me talk about tax treaties. You know, in order for you to claim any tax treaty, you do have to file a form. So let's talk about tax treaty. You know, the United States and other countries, they have all negotiated different tax treaties. One tax treaty may allow you to do this, where another tax treaty may not allow you to do that. Each one was negotiated separately, and you have to look at your own tax treaty to see whether or not there are some things that you don't have to include in income. Let's take an example. Since we're dealing with Ms. Kim, let's go to the People's Republic of China. Now remember on that 1042S it had an income category? This is where it's coming from, right there. You see it, income code 15, 16, 17, 42, 18, and 19. 15 is scholarship or fellowship. All right, maximum presence in the U.S. No specific time. I don't have a time frame. Required payer or employer. Look, it says any U.S. or foreign resident. Maximum amount of compensation, no limit. So I can get $1 million scholarship, and it's not going to be taxable to me. All right, and it gives you the treaty article. Let's look down at teaching, income code 18 for teaching. Maximum presence in the U.S., 3 years. Who is the required